Hello and welcome to the Iceni vlog When Tomorrow Comes. In this edition, we're kicking off the new year and discussing what we think will be the key issues impacting the property sector in 2022. To discuss this, I'm very pleased to have all our regional offices joining us today, with Callum Fraser from Edinburgh, Lucy Ferber from Manchester, Victoria Lane from Birmingham, along with Ian Anderson, who covers London and of course all the regions. Hi guys and welcome.
Hello, I thought you were going to say I was coming from the Wandsworth office.
that as well, Wandsworth, Farringdon, and basically all of the UK.
I've got the clocks on the wall.
Telling you the time from the different regions.
Wandsworth, London, Bournemouth.
Is Scotland an hour ahead, Callum? I think you guys are always ahead of the rest of us.
We like to be different. So.
Great. Well, on Scotland, we might kick off with that first, actually, in terms of the key issues looking ahead for 2022. And as part of that, I think it's worthwhile reflecting on last year, and perhaps one of the most significant events of the year was COP26 in Glasgow. So Callum, I suppose I just wonder, do you have a sense at this stage what the after effect of COP26 is? Is it business as usual, or do you think all this talk is becoming action?
Well, I think the danger with these big high-profile events is that everybody talks about them when they're happening, and then nothing. As soon as they're over, everyone stops talking about it. So, is everybody talking about COP26 on a day-to-day basis? In my experience, no. Lots of people are talking about the Iceni bike ride from London to Scotland to attend COP26, but I think we are certainly hearing about climate change as an ever more prominent subject from central government in Scotland, and certainly there's going to be big changes this year in the Scottish planning system with the new national planning framework, which is currently being consulted on, which puts the issue of climate change front and centre, with the aim of Scotland being a net zero sustainable country by 2045. So, without doubt, that issue is front and centre with the whole policy framework moving forward.
And do you see that coming forward both in plan making and decision taking? Do you think it's going to come? I know it's all, and it's the same in terms of the English local plans being made. Climate change is definitely a key consideration. I think it's just taking a bit longer to work it through from decision makers. How do you see that happening in Scotland this year?
Well, once it's adopted, the new national planning framework will become part of the development plan, albeit providing more strategic level policy guidance than local development plans, but it makes very clear that significant weight should be given to the global climate emergency in all planning decision making. So, as I say, that's a clear policy statement, and all local development plans as they come through from now on, if adopted on this basis, will that the climate emergency is a material consideration in planning decisions.
Yeah, and I think I think it's the same as Scotland, but in terms of England and Wales, they reckon now about 300 councils have declared a climate emergency. I think that's something about 75% of authorities. And we're starting to see that in terms of the NPPF. It's clear that it needs to be given weight in terms of plan making, and it's becoming more important at decision level in terms of the courts. And it's quite likely that this is going to be the year whereby it becomes more of a material consideration in determining applications. Ian, do you think we're starting to see that in terms of at a more local and regional level at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, dare I say, I'm probably treading on Vicky's toes and talking about the Gigafactory proposals that were recently just approved in the Midlands, but that's probably the most high-profile case where you could probably sculpt a planning case for saying that that's been made on sustainability grounds as a very special circumstance. I know you and I have spoken about when will there be a big front of centre planning argument about material circumstances for allowing perhaps a at the very least, carbon neutral scheme on the basis of a climate emergency authority. And then I guess the other point is something we've been talking about within Iceni a fair bit in recent weeks is, with things like the discussions that are beginning to take place on embodied carbon, that's perhaps talks more as well about kind of perhaps a rules-based system, the need to have some of those checks and balances addressed before you even get down to discussing the principle of development on projects. And I would have thought that we could expect to see that becoming more prevalent. And it's probably, some of those things have probably started in London. You think of the way that the London mayor and the London planners led on some of those things. Probably expect to see some of those ideas and practices rippling out now into the wider southeast and then further afield.
Yeah, I think that's true. And even in terms of, wasn't it the Tulip building last year and the Secretary of State's concern in terms of that being a concrete construction and actually getting into that point of embodied carbon. And I know that Grace and Jim and on our energy and sustainability team are really starting to grapple with those issues. And as you said, it's led in London, but it will expand, no doubt, beyond that. If we move on then, I suppose, into kind of Manchester, Alicia, and key issues there, I guess one key thought that's going to be on everyone, well, especially planners, but it impacts all of the property sector, is the reforms to the planning system. And we were told back in 2020 that we were going to basically rip up the outdated and ineffective system that we have. And needless to say, 18 months on, we are still with the said system and likely to be with it for the foreseeable. And I think there's pros and cons to that in terms of investors need stability, and rather than trying to start afresh, maybe just certain tinkering needs to be done rather than a wholesale review. But clearly the one thing that's going to be a key issue is levelling up, and we are promised, it looks like now maybe mid to late February, the Department of Levelling Up, as they are now called, are going to release their white paper to tell us what are going to be the kind of measures and metrics in terms of that being delivered. How do you guys see that impacting on your work in Manchester and spreading out to that wider area?
Yeah, I think levelling up really in the regions in Greater Manchester has kind of been spearheaded probably by people like Andy Burnham for longer than maybe the terms kind of existed in planning. For him, he's always been a major force in regional politics, and it's kind of about what does it actually mean on the ground for people? When is the investment coming? Where are the kind of key projects going to be? How is it going to benefit from levelling up funding? Where is that going to be directed? But obviously there's a lot of uncertainty about kind of white papers and how long they take to come forward, but also there's uncertainty still at a local level with things that are going to affect people quite quickly. So the Places for Everyone document, that's the kind of second iteration of the GMSF. So that's kind of a plan probably that's more on people's minds up here, trying to get that over the line. So that started off in 2014, and only this year it may be submitted for an examination, and then it needs to be adopted the following year, and that will be reliant on it being adopted by all 9 councils. So really there's quite a lot of uncertainty about that, because that will direct kind of the strategic allocations across 9 authorities. So we're talking about Greenbelt release. But also we've got the HS2 bill has just dropped today for the line from Crewe to Manchester. So in terms of levelling up and kind of directing investment, obviously HS2 will be a massive part of that. How long will that actually take is a big question. And I know today they've just raised issues that the proposals for HS2 at the station at Manchester, we're going to see a kind of viaduct overground station, and part of the line will be raised for over a mile. So that could actually take up over 500,000 square metres of prime development land. So at the moment, we're looking at sites of people that might be safeguarded at the moment, but actually now they might be not even safeguarded, but completely wiped out because of the proposals, or actually we might be okay because they're looking at alternatives to different spur links off HS2. Kind of also got to think what it means for past Manchester, so Leeds, Sheffield, places like that. Obviously part of HS2 has been kind of minimised, and we're looking at the Northern Rail connections off that. But that in itself needs a lot of investment, really, because I don't think we can level up if that just means levelling up between London to Birmingham to Manchester. We need to look kind of across the broader region and those smaller towns as well. So they're probably two key issues I see.
It's that classic case of unintended consequences, isn't it? It's all the benefits we know that would come with improved transport in HS2, but actually, as you say, what does that blight, what impact, and crucially as well, even the uncertainty, even if it's, you know, even for a number of years, that these proposals, and nothing can come forward for another 5 years until that's sorted out. And it's just the length of time that these plans tend to take.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many proposals kind of around Manchester, South Manchester, the new Mayfield Park, all of that area, that people now might be thinking, well, hang on, do we need to press pause and see kind of how the station might develop? Because at the moment, this HS2 station that they're proposing, when it opens, it will already be at full capacity from day one. So there's been no kind of extra capacity built into the system either. So uncertainty, the costs, and kind of, are these plans and proposals fit for purpose for the long term? Does that actually help growth in the north if we're kind of reaching maximum capacity, you know, on day one?
Very good. And Vicky, what's your thoughts in terms of these issues for levelling up in Birmingham? The kind of, I suppose, the West Midlands, Andy Street obviously is very pro-growth, and again probably highlights a bit like Burnham, and that the benefits of having these mayors of championing the regions and ensuring that they get investment and positive things happening around that.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the case, as well as what Lucy's described in Manchester. Obviously the HS2 station in Birmingham is going to come into Curzon Street, and obviously that line's already approved. I think the issue from kind of like a West Midlands perspective is more the impact of the housing growth and investment into employment land as well. Although HS2 is going to shave about 20-25 minutes of your journey time from Birmingham to London, it's the economical impacts as to how that's going to work, and whether they can recoup enough through ticket revenue, and whether that's going to work. And it's not just the fact of increasing the housing market, you've also got to think of it more holistically and increase the investment and employment opportunities around the West Midlands as well. And the Street's very pro-employment growth at the moment. He's been tweeting a lot, as Ian mentioned a few moments ago, about the big gigawatt factory that's been approved. So that's all on course at the moment. So I think the levelling up is coming in Birmingham, but I think it needs to be a more holistic approach across the north, essentially from kind of like Midlands, maybe Gloucestershire, Oxfordshire, northwards, because of the impact it's going to have. It's not just a case of building more houses to accommodate the growing population. It's about how, if those population aren't going to be commuting back down to London for work, they still need jobs and job opportunities within the local area to go and do that. And it's not only that, it's the facilities like schools, healthcare, open space recreation that needs to all combine to create a balanced and sustainable community.
Yeah, it's exactly that, isn't it? It's employment led, which is what a lot of new communities want to hear about when they, rather than this idea of having housing imposed on them. I've seen an interesting thing in the Guardian today, and it was highlighting that the task force for levelling up is quite enormous in terms of civil servants. I don't know, could anyone guess how many civil servants are currently working on the levelling up task force? Guess.
200.
Just over 3,011, which kind of highlights how huge the civil service is.
Yeah.
But the piece in the Guardian was, again, any opportunity to dig at the government, but it was basically highlighting that the majority of which work in London. I think circa about 2,000 of them are in London, and then you've got a few of them spread around the regions. But it did highlight to me, wow, this is the amount of people that are actually working on one single issue. And yeah, obviously there's a lot of goodwill there from government, and they wanted Michael Gove has been put in place evidently to do that job, but it's trying to see then what flows from all of these great ideas.
Can I get political?
Yes, I was just going to say, what's your thoughts? Where do you see it all going?
So Michael Gove is the last attempt to keep the United Kingdom together. That's why he's in charge of levelling up. He's trying to convince the Scots to stay as part of the United Kingdom. Callum's going to smile on that one. And there's never been a more important time than to change people's attention span in the lead up to local elections than probably now. And levelling up, you know, we talk about the red wall. You've got to convince those people that put their trust in the Tories through Brexit at the last general election that you can still do that against the recent furore around, you know, Basement Gate and COVID parties and all of the rest of it. We've got local elections coming up in May. You know, we always talk about that potentially having profound consequences. Depending on what happens, we might be talking about a new Prime Minister, because the Tories are always very good at ripping out their own throats. They never wait for anyone else to do it for them. And then who knows what impact that has on priorities, or in fact, how long they are then continuing in this present shape and form of government. So I think we've got a spicy few months coming up politically. And of course, that does have an impact on what we do from a planning and development perspective.
Yeah, massively so. Callum, do you feel, how does that impact in terms of, obviously you've got Nicola Sturgeon and she's got her clear mandate of what she wants to achieve, but how do you think that's aligned in terms of where Westminster's at and those uncertainties, or do they view themselves as quite removed from that?
I don't think we're slightly removed from it. She's rubbing her hands together at the moment with everything that's going on. I mean, obviously, elections coming up. I mean, I guess it'll be very interesting to see. The last election, in the local elections, the Conservatives improved their position in Scotland. They're the second largest party, both at Holyrood and in terms of, you know, local seats across the country. You know, I guess this is a big May in terms of what have recent events done to that position. Is it going to continue to, is the gap going to continue to shrink between the two, or is this just, you know, great news for the SNP again? I mean, in Edinburgh, the local situation reflects that nationally. SNP are the largest party, followed by the Conservatives, followed by Labour. The administration here is an SNP Labour coalition. And again, going back down to basic planning levels, we've got new local development plan coming through this year as well, alongside the National Planning Framework. It very much reflects the National Planning Framework in terms of 20-minute neighbourhoods, high-density urban development, trying to limit urban expansion. And I think that the Conservatives are less strident on some of those issues as the current administration are. So I think it's going to have, if there's any change in Edinburgh, it could have some pretty large implications for planning going forward, and certainly the local development plan that we're all contributing to at the moment during consultation. So it's going to be very interesting.
So watch this space in both Holyrood and Westminster in that regard.
But I don't think Boris has done them too many favours. I think it's safe to say that we shall see. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Well, yeah, it feels like there's quite interesting times even before we get to May in terms of Boris and potentially one civil servants report that we await. Okay, we'll probably on to a slightly lighter note before we finish up is the office and what might be termed the return to the office. I suppose in terms of England, we are no longer required to work from home, so we can all return to the office as much as we wish. Callum, you guys, as I understand it, it's still encouraged to work from home by and large when suits that type of
Yeah.
opposition at this stage. Where do you see that going in terms of, is it hybrid? I guess both in terms of the industry getting back to the office, but actually what that impact that has on our cities and high streets.
That's a wide-ranging question there. I don't know. We're at the stage where some of our peers and clients are despite the guidance, are fully back in the office. We have, I was speaking to planning officer at City of Edinburgh today. Nobody's back in the office. They're entirely still at home. Some people won't want to go back to the office. Some people will be chomping at the bit. I don't know what the answer is, to be honest. Are we going to be back in a situation where it's 3-line whip? You must all be in the office. I'm not sure we are. But in terms of the high streets, I don't know what the answer to that is at the moment, I'm afraid.
Vicky, have you got any thoughts from a Birmingham perspective? What do you think?
Yeah, from a Birmingham perspective, I mean, obviously we are now back in the office, which is great news. And obviously for a city centre, it's nice to see it starting to kind of have that growth in people being back around the city centre, using the retail, the coffee shops, the bars and the restaurants, which is obviously great to see because COVID's had such a massive impact on those industries. I think my concern is with the whole hybrid way of working is whether it is actually going to see grade A office space being let out that's just recently been built or completed over the past 2 years. Are they actually going to get full occupancy on those sites? And if not, what are the potential uses for those buildings, which automatically you think would be residential through a Class MA application? But again, what impact is that going to have on the high street in terms of the footfall and viability and vitality of town and city centres as we know them? We know through the introduction of an explosion of the internet, that internet shopping has changed people's way they shop, but a lot of people won't now go out into a city centre for a day out shopping, exploring the city, having meals and drinks out while you do it. A lot of people will just resort to online shopping now. That's very much become the norm, and I think that's an issue that the retail industry and certainly the hospitality industry as well need to try and resolve and get people back into the city centres with some form of attraction, and how that's going to take place, I think only time will tell.
It's that experience culture, isn't it? Rather than actually going in to purchase things, it's the idea of
it's the whole experience of it. It's I mean, I like to travel the UK, so I like to go to places like Manchester. I've even gone up to Edinburgh and Glasgow for a weekend, and I fill that weekend with experiences of going and exploring the city centres, the wider areas. My partner's a massive football fan, so we always have to go and have a look at the football stadium, whatever city we're into at the moment. So that's I get boringly dragged along to those.
Has he taken you to Ipswich yet?
We've not been to Ipswich yet.
Oh,
no.
well, there you go. There's a weekend for you.
Don't suggest that to him, Ian. So it is all about the experience of it, and we like to make a good day of it, really. And whether we buy anything or not, it's the experience of actually going and having that footfall around the city centres.
Great. And Lucy, what in terms of Manchester, I did see a piece in the Times recently, and I think the headline was "Why all the under 30s are moving to Manchester," because it's basically the place to be.
I did see that too. Yeah, I agree with what Vicky was saying there about it's all about the experience. I was listening to the Centre for Cities panel discussion today, and they were talking exactly about that. Chief execs and politicians saying the focus is going to be on creating an experience for people visiting cities, but at the moment the weekday experience and the weekday recovery is a lot slower than the weekend recovery. So really it needs to be the focus on how we get people back in the week. One of the chief execs, I think, was talking about Leeds city, and saying that they were very much holding the line in terms of retail centres. They weren't pushing for those to be converted. They would rather identify those struggling retail centres, whether that's in the city or kind of small districts and towns, and actually just investing in those again, acknowledging that if you improve them and improve that experience, people will come. We don't need to panic and start converting every kind of vacant retail shop into a flat or something else. Just wait and reinvest, and that will certainly help. And one of the other interesting points actually was they were saying about the fact that COVID hit the strongest centres the worst. So I think London lost the most weeks worth of sales, and in comparison, Burnley lost the least in the country with just 8 weeks during COVID. So really small kind of towns and districts can still perform really well. They've just got to be very distinct and make sure that they kind of have a distinct plan in place that reflects their character and their nature. Don't try and be a Manchester. If you're Burnley, be Burnley and be good at what you're good at instead.
That's really interesting, isn't it? It's back to this kind of just authenticity and being what you're good at rather than trying to fake it. Okay, well, I suppose, Ian, do you have any final thoughts on that? I'll give you the closing remark, and then I think we'll draw to a close.
I'm just a bit cynical about the discussions on offices. I've got to be honest. I just think it's always easy to flag the headlines of the Googles and the Facebooks. You've got gazillions of pounds to change the layout of their space, but we're a country built on small and medium-sized businesses, and if your office space has probably just gone up 4 times per head through a combination of people not being in the office as much and the overall number of people being down as well, and then needing to give people more space to convince them to stay there, you know, that has a massive knock-on effect on businesses, and I don't think we've seen the last of that by any means.
Watch this space. Brilliant. Well, listen, thank you very much for joining me, and it's been great to consider the things that are set to keep us busy in 2022. And for those watching, I hope you find it useful. Thanks very much, and take care.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.